Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of antebellum Mississippi. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're hearing this narration. The year was 1832 when 12-year-old Samuel was sent to retrieve tools from the weathered tobacco barn at the edge of the Willoughby plantation near Natchez. What he discovered instead was Mrs. Eleanor Willoughby, the master's young bride of just 19, hidden among the dried tobacco leaves and wooden barrels, her fine silk dress soiled with dirt, her eyes filled with desperate urgency rather than the expected disdain. On that humid August afternoon, as cicadas droned their relentless symphony in the surrounding cypress trees, Mrs. Willoughby startled at Samuel's entrance, her pale hand flying to her throat before her features composed themselves into an unexpected expression of relief, not the cold anger Samuel had anticipated upon finding the mistress in such an undignified state. "I require moments of solitude to maintain my sanity in this strange new world," she reportedly whispered, according to a fragment of her diary recovered decades later, before imploring him with unexpected humility to preserve the secret of her hidden sanctuary, a request that contradicted everything the young enslaved boy understood about the rigid hierarchy of plantation life, yet one he found himself silently agreeing to with a cautious nod. Parish records from the street, Mary's Episcopal Church in Natchez, discovered during an archival reorganization in 1897, documented Eleanor's arrival from Boston just 6 months prior, noting her marriage to Clayton Willoughby had been arranged through correspondence between the Willoughby patriarch and Eleanor's father, a struggling merchant seeking advantageous connections for his educated daughter. Letters exchanged between the families, later found in the Massachusetts Historical Society archives, repeatedly emphasized Eleanor's exceptional refinement and literary education, suitable for elevating the cultural standing of the Willoughby name in Mississippi society. What these formal communications failed to anticipate was the profound cultural shock awaiting the northern bride, whose clandestine meetings with Samuel would eventually lead to mysterious disappearances, a midnight fire that consumed plantation records, and the discovery, 70 years later, of coded letters and a skeleton beneath the barn's limestone foundation, its wrists bound with rusted chains. The exchanges began innocuously enough, with Samuel slipping small items into the tobacco barn during his morning chores, a stub of pencil concealed in his palm, sheets of paper folded tightly inside his threadbare shirt, a small leather-bound book borrowed from the master's extensive library when no one was watching. Plantation work ledgers, meticulously maintained by overseer James Blackwood and preserved in the Natchez Historical Society's collection, document a curious notation on the 17th of September, 1832. Boy Samuel reassigned from cotton fields to house duties at Mrs. Willoughby's specific request, despite objections. This reassignment placed Samuel in strategic proximity to the main house's activities while providing him regular opportunities to visit the tobacco barn under the guise of fetching supplies for household tasks. What remained hidden from Blackwood's careful accounting was the true nature of Samuel and Eleanor's clandestine arrangement, revealed only decades later through a remarkable discovery in 1901. When renovation workers at a Boston townhouse uncovered a hidden compartment beneath a bedroom floorboard containing over 20 letters signed simply E.W. from Natchez, Mississippi. These letters, addressed to the prominent Garfield family, known abolitionists with connections to the Underground Railroad, detailed horrific conditions on the Willoughby plantation and expressed increasing desperation for assistance. "I document everything I witness," Eleanor wrote in one letter dated November 1832, filling pages with atrocities that would shock the conscience of any civilized person, and which my husband dismisses as necessary discipline. The Willoughby household account books show unusual purchases during this period, additional writing paper ordered from New Orleans, special ink typically used for correspondence rather than ledger keeping, and multiple books on politics and natural philosophy that seemed incongruous with the plantation's usual acquisitions. According to testimony provided in 1890 by Isabel Johnson, formerly enslaved at the neighboring Davidson plantation. Samuel was viewed with increasing suspicion by other house servants who noted his peculiar preoccupation with Mrs. Willoughby's schedule and his unexplained absences, though none dared report their observations to Master Willoughby for fear of punishment. By late autumn, Samuel had graduated from merely delivering supplies to actively participating in Eleanor's documentation efforts. Standing watch outside the barn during her writing sessions and memorizing messages too dangerous to commit to paper, his young mind becoming an undetectable vessel for treasonous information that would have resulted in severe consequences had the true nature of their collaboration been discovered. Their forbidden education commenced on a rain-soaked evening in October 1832, when Eleanor produced a small primer typically used for children's instruction and opened it beneath the dim light of a hooded lantern in the barn's shadowed corner, an act that, if discovered, would result in severe punishment for both teacher and pupil, as Mississippi state law explicitly prohibited literacy among the enslaved population, with penalties including whipping, mutilation, and even death for repeated offenses. "I cannot bear to witness such deliberate efforts to maintain ignorance," wrote Eleanor in her personal journal, recovered in 1920 from a hidden compartment in the writing desk she had abandoned during her mysterious disappearance. The water-damaged pages revealing her mounting horror at plantation practices. "Today I watched as Mr. Blackwood ordered 30 lashes for Martha merely for looking him in the eye. Her back already a map of scars from previous corrections. This systematic destruction of human dignity must be recorded and exposed, no matter the personal risk." Archaeological excavations conducted by Tougaloo College researchers in 1965 uncovered definitive physical evidence of this clandestine education. Beneath the tobacco barn's rotting floorboards, a carefully constructed hollow space lined with oilcloth contained 13 slate fragments with faded but discernible alphabet exercises, simple words, and eventually complete sentences, all etched in 2 distinct handwritings that graphologists later confirmed as belonging to individuals of dramatically different educational backgrounds. According to Eleanor's journal entries from November through January, the lessons progressed from basic letter recognition to rudimentary reading, with Samuel displaying an extraordinary aptitude that both impressed and unsettled his teacher, who noted, "He absorbs knowledge with such hunger that I fear what might happen should others discover the awakening consciousness behind his carefully maintained expression of servility." The risks they courted grew more severe as, quote, "winter descended upon the plantation, forcing them to conduct lessons in the bitter cold of the unheated barn, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air as Samuel traced letters on a slate with fingers often stiffened and cracked from outdoor labor." Yet Eleanor's accounts describe his unwavering determination. "He arrived today with bloodied fingertips from cotton picking, yet insisted we continue with our reading of Psalms, his favorite passages being those promising divine justice for the oppressed, a concept I dare not discuss further even in these private pages." By early February 1833, the atmosphere at Willoughby Plantation had grown tense with unspoken suspicion, as Clayton Willoughby began questioning Samuel's movements with increasing frequency. His voice laced with barely contained contempt during these interrogations, which servants later recounted often concluded with Samuel being struck for perceived insolence when his answers proved unsatisfactory. Overseer James Blackwood, whose meticulous daily reports were preserved in county archives, documented numerous instances of Samuel's unusual patterns of movement and inexplicable absences from assigned tasks, noting specifically on February 7th that the boy had been observed lingering near the tobacco barn when no reasonable duties required his presence there, information he dutifully reported to Master Willoughby with the suggestion that stricter oversight and correction may be warranted. The growing scrutiny extended beyond the plantation's boundaries, as evidenced by the St. Mary's Episcopal Church vestry records, which contain a troubling entry dated the 12th of February, 1833. Reverend Thomas Mayfield called to Willoughby Estate at Master's request to counsel Mrs. Willoughby regarding her unusual melancholy, withdrawal from proper society, and reports of inappropriate familiarity with the property. matters requiring spiritual guidance to restore proper Christian order within the household. Eleanor's diary entries from this period reveal her mounting terror, her normally composed handwriting deteriorating into jagged, hurried strokes. C. questioned me at dinner about my whereabouts yesterday afternoon. His eyes never left my face as I fabricated an explanation about walking the East Gardens. I fear Samuel may have been observed delivering my latest correspondence to Mr. Peterson's carriage during his supply delivery. The precarious nature of their situation was further documented in a letter Eleanor managed to dispatch to her Boston contacts. Intercepted decades later by Mississippi postal authorities investigating an unrelated matter. I burn with fear each time the floorboards creak outside my chamber door. Wondering if this is the moment our activities are discovered, Blackwood watches the boy with predatory attention, while my husband's questions grow increasingly specific, as though information is being gathered from multiple sources, yet abandoning our purpose now would condemn dozens to continued brutality, including the child whose mind blossoms despite every effort to stifle it. The conspiracy expanded in mid-March when Eleanor carefully approached Betsy, her designated lady's maid whose literacy had been concealed from the Willoughby household for nearly 4 years. A secret revealed in sworn testimony Betsy provided to Freedmen's Bureau officials in 1866. Mrs. Eleanor caught me reading scraps of newspaper lining her trunk, instead of punishment. She whispered that we shared dangerous knowledge that might serve a greater purpose. Adams County Historical Society archives contain the remarkable deposition of Jeremiah Holcomb, owner of the neighboring Oak Hill plantation, who reported witnessing a suspicious exchange of documents between Mrs. Willoughby and a Massachusetts textile merchant named Barnabas Wheeler during a spring social gathering at the Natchez Exchange Hotel, noting that the lady appeared unduly animated in conversation with a northern businessman of abolitionist appearance, their hands briefly touching during what seemed a deliberate passing of folded papers concealed within a handkerchief. Wheeler's subsequent activities in the region drew additional scrutiny, as Customs House records indicate he extended his Mississippi stay by 3 weeks beyond his stated business purposes, making repeated visits to various plantations under the pretense of cotton quality assessments. Meanwhile, correspondence recovered from the Boston Historical Society reveals a network of increasingly specific communications among abolitionist circles, with letters from prominent activist Emmeline Porter referencing our Mississippi situation, progressing with unexpected assistance from a lady of considerable standing whose conscience has awakened to our cause. Plantation records show Betsy's duties were expanded to include accompanying Mrs. Willoughby on her visits to Natchez for shopping and social obligations, providing critical opportunities for communications with Northern sympathizers, while Samuel continued his household duties with heightened vigilance, as Eleanor noted in a hastily written diary entry. Our circle widens by necessity, though each new confidant multiplies our danger exponentially. Betsy's assistance proves invaluable, her knowledge of the servant networks offering pathways of communication invisible to white oversight. The widening conspiracy was further evidenced by unusual purchases documented in Eleanor's household accounts. 3 additional blankets despite approaching summer weather, preserved foodstuffs typically acquired for long journeys, and a small compass, ostensibly purchased as a decorative curiosity but discovered among Eleanor's possessions following her disappearance, suggesting preparations for a journey of considerable significance and risk. On a stifling April evening, as spring transformed the Mississippi landscape into a riot of unwelcome color that seemed to mock the human suffering it witnessed, Eleanor finally revealed her dangerous proposition to Samuel during one of their clandestine barn meetings, her voice barely above a whisper, as she outlined an escape plan northward and offered to include him in this perilous journey, a moment documented decades later through Samuel's own written account discovered among abolitionist papers in Philadelphia. Adams County transaction ledgers from April 1833 record Mrs. Willoughby's purchase of 2 sturdy traveling trunks from Natchez merchant Frederick Simmons, along with preserved foods, sturdy boots in a small size that could not have possibly fit her delicate feet, and woolen garments unnecessary for Mississippi's climate, all ostensibly acquired in preparation for a journey to Boston where, according to her correspondence, her mother had fallen gravely ill and required her daughter's attendance. Clayton Willoughby's emphatic rejection of this proposed journey was recorded in his personal letter to his father-in-law, discovered among Boston financial records in 1893. While I sympathize with your family's distress, I cannot permit Eleanor's travel at this time. Her increasing eccentricity and melancholy suggest a feminine nervous condition requiring strict oversight rather than the excitement of travel, which would surely exacerbate her peculiar humors. The true nature of Eleanor's intentions was definitively confirmed in 1902, when workers renovating the dilapidated tobacco barn uncovered a remarkable artifact, concealed within a hollowed support beam. Fragments of a carefully annotated map showing detailed routes from Mississippi through Tennessee and Ohio toward Canada, with safe houses marked by subtle crosses and dangerous areas circled in faded ink. The margins filled with notations in two distinctively different handwritings that graphologists later identified as belonging to individuals of dramatically different educational backgrounds, one showing refined Boston penmanship, the other the determined but uneven script of someone newly literate. Most tellingly, one fragment contained a notation in the educated hand. 3 weeks' journey if weather holds. Samuel must memorize alternate route through Kentucky in case of separation. The betrayal occurred on a rain-lashed May evening when Overseer Blackwood, conducting an unexpected inspection of the servant quarters after curfew, discovered Samuel huddled beneath a threadbare blanket with a carefully folded letter intended for Eleanor's Boston contacts, a damning document outlining a planned rendezvous with an abolitionist courier at the Natchez docks. Plantation punishment records, meticulously maintained in Blackwood's precise script and preserved in the Mississippi Department of Archives, detail the brutal consequence. Boy Samuel received 40 lashes for possession of forbidden written materials, applied with medium whip to maximize pain while preserving working capacity. Subject remained obstinate throughout correction, refusing to identify source of contraband despite additional incentives applied with hot iron to palms. Despite the methodical torture, Samuel maintained absolute silence regarding Eleanor's involvement, a fact noted with grudging respect in Blackwood's private journal found decades later. The boy exhibits unusual loyalty and fortitude for his race, withstanding measures that have broken men twice his age and size. Master suspects his wife's involvement but lacks evidence to confront her directly. Adams County Court records dated June 3, 1833, contain Blackwood's formal petition, requesting judicial support for implementation of enhanced disciplinary measures throughout Willoughby Plantation, due to concerning signs of intellectual contamination and unrest among 4417 workers, requiring decisive correction to prevent potential insurrection. Eleanor's anguish manifested in the extraordinary document discovered in 1944 when the Willoughby family Bible was donated to the Mississippi Historical Society by distant descendants. Careful examination revealed nearly 50 verses containing faint underlined letters that, when assembled sequentially, formed coherent messages describing her torment. Samuel suffers beyond imagining for my carelessness. His courage shames my privileged caution. His wounds burn in my conscience like brands. Yet our plan must proceed with greater urgency before others suffer. Similar fate. Household staff testimonies collected by Freedmen's Bureau investigators in 1865 described Eleanor's desperate attempts to treat Samuel's wounds secretly, smuggling medicinal supplies from the main house medicine cabinet and tearing her fine undergarments into bandages, acts of compassion observed by Betsy, who later reported that Mrs. would weep silent tears while applying poultices to the boy's shredded back, whispering promises that his suffering would not be in vain, that freedom would taste sweeter for being purchased with such terrible currency. On the 17th of June, 1833, as midnight approached and most of the Willoughby plantation had succumbed to uneasy slumber, Flames suddenly erupted from the plantation office, a small but significant building that housed all records of ownership, property transactions, and slave purchase documentation spanning 3 generations of Willoughby enterprise. The Natchez Volunteer Fire Brigade records describe their arrival at 1:22 a.m. to find a conflagration beyond containment, the structure entirely engulfed, and plantation ledgers reduced to cinders, despite frantic attempts by household staff to salvage documentation. While Adams County Sheriff's reports note the curious circumstance that the plantation bell failed to sound the customary fire alarm, delaying response by nearly 40 minutes. Amidst the chaos of bucket brigades and shouted orders, Samuel's absence went unnoticed until dawn broke over the smoldering ruins. When his sleeping pallet was discovered empty during the morning slave count, a disappearance immediately connected to the suspicious fire by Master Willoughby, who, according to Overseer Blackwood's hastily scrawled notes, flew into unprecedented rage upon realizing the boy had escaped during the disruption, smashing a valuable porcelain vase against the dining room wall while declaring lethal intentions should the instigator be captured. The Natchez Courier's front-page notice on the 19th of June, 1833, prominently featured Willoughby's unprecedented offer, $500 reward for the capture of runaway slave boy Samuel, approximately 12 years of age, suspected of arson and destruction of valuable property. Boy is unusually articulate and may attempt to pass communications to Northern sympathizers. Reward doubles if delivered alive for appropriate questioning, and correction. Most revealing was the abrupt conclusion of Eleanor Willoughby's private diary, discovered decades later hidden within a hollowed Bible, where her typically lengthy reflections terminated with a single cryptic line dated June 17. Tonight, everything changes. The die is cast. And whatever providence awaits beyond these plantation boundaries, it cannot exceed the hell within them. Curiously, household inventories conducted by Blackwood the following morning noted additional unexplained disappearances. A small silver locket containing a miniature portrait of Eleanor's mother, 2 woolen blankets from the linen closet, a leather-bound volume of Wordsworth's poetry from the library, and most significantly, Eleanor's personal medicine kit containing laudanum and various remedies, items whose absence initially escaped notice amidst the more dramatic concerns of fire and fugitive, yet which would later provide crucial evidence regarding the carefully orchestrated nature of that chaotic night. The weeks following the fire and Samuel's disappearance transformed Willoughby Plantation into a landscape of palpable tension and deteriorating order. As Clayton Willoughby descended into a state of obsessive suspicion that manifested in increasingly erratic behavior, missing meals, conducting impromptu midnight inspections of slave quarters, and interrogating house servants with such aggressive intensity that 3 fled despite the severe consequences of capture. Correspondence between neighboring planter families, preserved in the Devereaux collection at the Mississippi Archives, reveals growing concern about Willoughby's stability, with Edward Chamberlain writing to his brother-in-law on the 9th of July, 1833. Clayton Willoughby appears a man consumed by suspicion, neglecting basic plantation operations while fixating on elaborate conspiracy theories involving Northern abolitionists and his own wife. His appearance has grown haggard, his conversation circular and paranoid, his demeanor unpredictable, to a degree that many families now decline invitations to Willoughby gatherings. Eleanor's position within the household deteriorated dramatically, as evidenced by household staff testimonies collected after emancipation, describing her effective imprisonment within the main house, with Martha, a kitchen servant, recalling how Master ordered all Mrs. Eleanor's doors locked from outside, her windows nailed shut, and no one permitted to speak with her without Master or Blackwood present. She became like a ghost drifting through rooms, her face bruised and eyes hollow. The physical dimension of Eleanor's suffering emerged starkly in the medical daybook of Dr. James Harrington, discovered during a 1932 university research project, containing a disturbing entry dated the 23rd of July, 1833. Summoned to Willoughby Estate regarding Mrs. W.E., found patient suffering extreme nervous exhaustion, malnourishment, and injuries consistent with physical correction, including spiral fracture of left radius, facial contusions, and extensive bruising across shoulders and back. Mr. W attributes conditions to patients' hysterical episodes and falls. Recommended laudanum for pain and complete bed rest. Concerned regarding patient's vacant affect and minimal verbal response, suggesting profound melancholia or possible traumatic withdrawal. Mr. W rejected suggestion of hospital care in Natchez, insisting on home treatment under his direct supervision. Plantation productivity plummeted during this period, with cotton yields declining by nearly 40% according to county harvest records, as Willoughby redirected labor resources to constructing additional security measures and conducting fruitless searches for Samuel across neighboring counties, rather than attending to agricultural necessities. On the 15th of August, 1833, exactly 2 months after the suspicious fire that had consumed the plantation records, the household awakened to another shocking absence. Eleanor Willoughby had vanished from her locked bedchamber, the window found open despite its previous nailing shut, and a knotted rope of bed linens dangling from the sill to the ground 15 feet below. Adams County Sheriff's reports document Clayton Willoughby's near-hysterical reaction. Subject appeared in extreme agitation, alternating between accusations of abolitionist conspiracy and self-recrimination for insufficient security measures, demanded immediate formation of search parties and authorization for armed pursuit across county lines. The plantation descended into unprecedented chaos as Willoughby assembled over 40 armed men to scour the surrounding countryside, offering a staggering reward of $2,000 for his wife's return, a sum equivalent to the value of 4 prime field hands, according to contemporary financial records. The Natchez Courier's August 17th edition carried a front-page notice describing Eleanor as potentially abducted by northern radical elements, or possibly by runaway slaves seeking vengeance against plantation authority, while privately circulated letters among neighboring planters suggested more disturbing possibilities, with Julia Beaumont writing to her sister, "The prevailing whisper, which none dare voice in Clayton's presence, suggests Mrs. W. may have orchestrated her own disappearance, perhaps in league with the missing boy. A scandal so profound it would destroy the Willoughby name should confirmation emerge." The most compelling evidence regarding Eleanor's fate remained undiscovered until 1905, when historical researchers examining Mississippi River commercial records uncovered a deposition from Captain Thaddeus Montgomery of the riverboat Southern Star, who reported transporting a slender woman wearing mourning clothes with an exceptionally thick veil, accompanied by what appeared to be a young male servant of slight build with bandaged hands, as passengers boarding at a small landing 7 miles south of Natchez on August 16th, traveling downriver toward New Orleans. Montgomery's statement noted he thought little of the unusual pair at the time, as grieving widows commonly traveled with household staff, though he later considered their behavior noteworthy upon hearing of Mrs. Willoughby's disappearance, observing that the woman spoke only through the boy, never showing her face, and both retired immediately to their private cabin, refusing all meals and services until disembarking at New Orleans 3 days later. Clayton Willoughby's pursuit of his vanished wife and Samuel transformed from determined investigation into destructive obsession, his once prosperous plantation falling into disrepair as he redirected funds toward private investigators, bounty hunters, and dubious informants claiming knowledge of Eleanor's whereabouts. Financial records from Natchez National Bank document his alarming fiscal deterioration. Between 1833 and 1835, Willoughby mortgaged his property 3 times, sold 27 enslaved workers at below-market rates for immediate capital, and liquidated Eleanor's jewelry collection to finance his increasingly desperate search. Correspondence between Willoughby and law enforcement officials across 5 states, preserved in Louisiana State Police archives, reveals his descending spiral into paranoia, with one letter to New Orleans Police Commissioner Hamilton dated March 1834, claiming an extensive conspiracy of Northern radicals has infiltrated the highest levels of Mississippi and Louisiana society, providing my wife and her accomplice with false documentation, disguises, and transportation northward. I trust no one in official capacity, as abolitionists have corrupted every institution with their blood money. The physical toll of this obsession manifested in Willoughby's deteriorating health, with Dr. Mayfield's medical journal noting, patient exhibits symptoms of advanced alcoholism, malnourishment, and sleep deprivation, arriving at consultations disheveled and incoherent, often having gone several days without changing a tire or attending to basic hygiene. By early 1835, Willoughby's public behavior had become so erratic that St. Mary's Episcopal Church vestry records document an emergency meeting regarding the disturbing conduct of Mr. Packet, Willoughby, who interrupted Sunday services with incoherent accusations against Northern infiltrators hiding among the congregation. The final chapter of Willoughby's tragic decline culminated with his involuntary commitment to Charity Hospital's asylum wing in New Orleans on the 10th of September 1835, where attending physician Dr. Laurent Broussard diagnosed acute melancholia with paranoid features, exacerbated by excessive consumption of spirits, noting that the patient repeatedly describes elaborate conspiracies involving his wife, missing property, and Boston abolitionists. Death came mercifully on the 17th of February 1837, with Willoughby's body returned for burial in the family cemetery, the plantation by then heavily mortgaged and falling into ruin. The decades following Clayton Willoughby's death witnessed the gradual dissolution of the once prominent estate, as creditors divided and sold parcels to satisfy outstanding debts, initiating a pattern of fragmented ownership documented meticulously in Adams County land transaction records. Between 1837 and 1875, the plantation's core acreage changed hands 7 times, with each subsequent owner acquiring less land than his predecessor as economic pressures and changing agricultural practices rendered the antebellum plantation model increasingly unsustainable in the post-war South. The tobacco barn, once the secret sanctuary of forbidden education and revolutionary planning, gradually faded into obscurity, first repurposed for general storage by the Montgomery family owners from 1851 to 1868, then partially dismantled for lumber during Reconstruction by tenant farmers working the subdivided fields, and finally abandoned entirely by 1880, when agricultural focus shifted predominantly to smaller-scale cotton production requiring different infrastructure. Adams County Recorder's Office documents from 1902 reveal the final fragmentation. The remaining Willoughby acreage was surveyed, subdivided into 14 distinct parcels, and sold at public auction to various farmers of modest means, none of whom possessed knowledge of the property's complex and troubling history. The story of Eleanor and Samuel having faded from local memory, replaced by vaguer legends of hauntings and misfortune that locals attributed to Civil War tragedies rather than earlier events. The barn's ruins attracted scholarly attention only once, before its eventual rediscovery, when Mississippi Geological Survey engineer Bradford Matthews conducted a regional soil assessment in 1899 and documented an anomalous finding. The agricultural structure approximately 12 miles southeast of Natchez exhibits an unusual foundation composition consisting of precisely cut limestone blocks extending approximately 6 feet below ground level, and stores. Expensive and sophisticated construction method entirely inconsistent with the utilitarian purpose of tobacco curing and storage, particularly given the ready availability of local timber for foundation purposes. Matthews' observation, buried within technical appendices of a government report concerned primarily with agricultural productivity forecasts, went unremarked upon by subsequent readers, though he privately noted in his field journal that the construction suggests a secondary purpose beyond agricultural use, perhaps storage of valuables requiring protection from the region's notorious flooding, or conceivably a more clandestine function given its isolated position on the former property. The Willoughby Plantation's forgotten history erupted into public consciousness on the 17th of April, 1902, when farmer Thomas Jenkins, while demolishing the dilapidated tobacco barn to expand his cotton acreage, discovered a previously unknown cellar beneath the limestone foundation, a cavernous space accessed through a trapdoor ingeniously concealed beneath what appeared to be an immovable curing platform. The Adams County Gazette reported Jenkins's shocking discovery in sensationalized terms. Local farmer uncovers chamber of horrors, describing how Jenkins lowered himself by rope into the musty underground chamber and by lantern light encountered a grim tableau of bondage and death that prompted his immediate notification of county authorities. Sheriff's Department records document the subsequent investigation led by Deputy Marshal Thornton, who descended into the cellar to confirm Jenkins' macabre discovery. A human skeleton lying against the northern wall, its wrists bound by severely corroded iron manacles attached to a rusted chain embedded in the limestone. The remains, surrounded by tattered fabric remnants consistent with mid-19th century attire. County Coroner Willard Peterson's official report, preserved in county archives, describes the skeletal remains as belonging to an adult male of average height and indeterminate race, deceased for no less than 5 decades, based on deterioration patterns, with evidence of healed fractures to multiple ribs, left radius, and 3 fingers of the right hand. Injuries consistent with significant physical trauma predating death. Most significant among the chamber's contents was a copper strongbox discovered in a recessed nook, its contents partially preserved due to the airtight seal. 17 handwritten letters in varying states of decay, which Mississippi Historical Society researchers later identified as correspondence between Eleanor Willoughby and prominent Boston abolitionists Frederick and Sophia Garfield, detailing plans for multiple slave escapes from plantations throughout Adams County. Particularly revealing was a fragment dated the 1st of June, 1833, in which Eleanor wrote, "The first departure must necessarily become a distraction for subsequent movements. S. understands his role in this dangerous orchestration and exhibits courage beyond his years, though I fear the consequences should our strategy fail." While the letters provided compelling evidence regarding Eleanor and Samuel's activities, they offered no definitive explanation for the chained skeleton, though one partially legible note contained the cryptic passage, "Blackwood suspects, discovered our cache. Questions cannot be withstood indefinitely. Final measures may become necessary before our departure." The forgotten Willoughby mystery resurfaced in 1965 when Dr. Margaret Winters, a distinguished historian from Fisk University researching clandestine Underground Railroad operations in the Deep South, obtained permission to re-examine the skeletal remains and artifacts discovered in the hidden cellar 6 decades earlier. Mississippi Historical Society records document her groundbreaking interdisciplinary approach, collaborating with forensic anthropologist Dr. Raymond Tanner from Tulane University Medical School to apply modern scientific techniques unavailable during the original investigation. Their comprehensive analysis, published in the Journal of Southern Historical Studies, definitively established that the skeleton belonged to an adult male approximately 30 to 40 years of age, not an adolescent as some local legends suggested, with osteological indicators of African ancestry and evidence of at least 7 healed fractures consistent with systematic physical abuse typical of enslaved individuals subjected to punishment. Most significantly, Winters identified an unusual deformity in the skeleton's right foot, bones fused in a manner suggesting untreated trauma, and through painstaking examination of Willoughby Plantation punishment logs, connected this distinctive injury to overseer James Blackwood himself, who was documented as having suffered a severe crushing of right foot beneath wagon wheel in an 1831 accident, an injury that left him with a characteristic limp noted in multiple contemporary accounts. This identification catalyzed Winters' revolutionary theory, expounded in her landmark 1967 book, Beneath the Burning Barn, Resistance and Retribution on the Mississippi Frontier, that Eleanor and Samuel had not merely escaped but had actively eliminated the primary threat to their freedom. a conclusion supported by trace evidence of accelerants found on preserved fabric fragments and scorch marks on the cellar's ceiling, consistent with an attempted burning initiated from within the chamber. The mystery deepened in 2010 when Oxford University genetic researchers, using advanced DNA extraction techniques on bone samples preserved from the original discovery, conclusively determined the remains could not possibly belong to Samuel, whose maternal lineage was documented in Willoughby purchase records, raising profound questions about the skeleton's actual identity and the broader conspiracy potentially involving multiple enslaved individuals. As lead researcher, Dr. Elaine Michaels observed in her findings published in Historical Archaeology, the presence of Blackwood's remains, chained within a secret chamber beneath a strategically burned structure, fundamentally reconfigures our understanding of resistance strategies employed by enslaved individuals and their allies, suggesting not mere escape but revolutionary justice administered by those previously thought powerless. The final piece of this extraordinary historical puzzle emerged unexpectedly in 2015, when the Mississippi Historical Society received a remarkable donation from Catherine Garfield Lewis, great-great-granddaughter of prominent Boston abolitionists Frederick and Sophia Garfield, a collection of family documents preserved for generations, including correspondence with numerous fugitives they had assisted through the perilous journey to freedom in Canada. Among these yellowed papers, archivists discovered a letter of profound significance dated the 12th of November 1850, sent from Montreal and signed simply E.W., its contents providing the first credible glimpse of Samuel's fate, the boy, now a man, who carries the scars of Mississippi but teaches others with the gift you gave him, continues our sacred work among recently arrived souls seeking new lives beyond the reach of southern chains. His eloquence when describing freedom's meaning to those who have never known it brings tears to even the most hardened witnesses. Contemporary Canadian census records from 1851, examined by researchers following this revelation, document an Eleanor Williams, widow, born United States, operating a small school for formerly enslaved individuals in a predominantly black settlement outside Montreal, assisted by Samuel Williams, teacher, born Mississippi, their shared surname suggesting a familial connection, though whether maternal, marital, or merely protective subterfuge remains contested among historians. The Willoughby case continues to generate passionate academic debate regarding the precise nature of Eleanor and Samuel's relationship, with Dr. Winter's controversial 2017 paper, Beyond Maternal Protection, reconsidering boundaries in the Willoughby escape, suggesting evidence for a more complex emotional bond that defied contemporary categorization, a theory vigorously disputed by traditional historians who maintain Eleanor acted purely from abolitionist conviction and maternal protection. As visitors stand today on the former Willoughby land, now a historical site maintained by the National Park Service, they encounter not certainty but profound questions about power, resistance, and human connection across seemingly impermeable social boundaries. The skeleton discovered in chains beneath the barn, now conclusively identified as Overseer Blackwood through modern forensic techniques, serves as a grim reminder that the path to freedom sometimes required extraordinary measures from those previously deemed powerless, while the fragmentary glimpses of Eleanor and Samuel's Canadian lives suggest that, for some fortunate few, escape from bondage could lead not merely to survival, but to meaningful lives of purpose, dignity, and perhaps even happiness beyond the long shadow of the plantation system.